This is Bioshock The Collection. We're on the Nintendo Switch, and we're going to be showing off a bit of each of these games. We have Bioshock 1 Remastered, we have Bioshock 2 Remastered, and of course, Bioshock Infinite. So we're going to start by going over the first Bioshock game, and again breaking down each of these by what they provide. So you can buy them as the collection, which is what we're going over right now, or you can get them as individual titles if any of them particularly hit your fancy. So in this first game, this is the one that most leans into the element of being a horror-based title. You're under the sea, you crash down from an airplane, and you're kind of trying to figure out where you are, what's happening, and the general gist around that. So you move around collecting these special plasmids that will alter your DNA and make you a lot stronger. And they give you special skills that allow you to do things such as shoot electricity, send out fireballs, that kind of thing. You're going to gather a bunch of interesting weaponry and tools as you make your way through, meeting some strange, interesting characters along the way. One of them is a seemingly friendly voice, whereas the other is rather hostile to you. You're seeing this decaying city continuously break down and just be destroyed all around you as the society continues to just basically crumble under the weight of the problems that have been building here for a long time, and you're just kind of a part of that and also kind of pathing your own history here. You also have a certain element of choice in regards to where things are going to go in regards to some of your actions. We do have the Big Daddies, which are always entertaining to see with their little sisters, and there's a whole theme of Adam. And generally, it's just very well done. I was very pleased with this effort for the Switch. It looks really good. It comes across as clean. Some of the elements, such as like pools of water and the reflections, are a little bit rough around the edges, but for the most part, it does look really good. It does look really clean, and they nail the atmosphere for bringing this particular title back. I'm really happy with the effort here. It also comes with all of the DLC content alongside the museum aspect in the game's menu, so you can take a look at some of the concepts that were left out. It's got a good length to it. It's mostly it does lean into the horror elements the most of the series, but it does have certain elements of being an action title as you're roaming around dealing with these, creatures, using these abilities that you're gaining, facing off against the threats of the deep. There are collectibles to gather, things to do, places to explore, new tools to kind of collect along the way, like I mentioned, and it's just generally a really well done game. It's certainly worth your time. It's just as good today as it was back then. They nailed the performance, the visuals, and the style of putting it on the Nintendo Switch. It's great to be able to take this anywhere on the go, and that kind of really does come across for any of the options within this package. Being able to take these great single-player experiences anywhere with you and getting the full, breadth of these adventures, especially, this Rapture, which is the place that they're at, the scenery, the style of, the place that you're located in, being under the sea is quite wondrous, especially when you're first kind of starting off, and that's why I did want to show off that aspect, because it is something to behold when you are first coming down here and exploring this crazy, messed up society. It's just absolutely fantastic. And now that one's wrapping up, we're moving into Bioshock 2 Remastered. So this is a very different game. This takes place a long time kind of after the original game ended. It's a completely different character. You're Delta. You're basically a precursor to the Big Daddy. You awaken after a decade of being out of it due to some interesting events that you'll discover when if you start at the beginning of the game. So it's a very different perspective. Obviously, you got the drill and you got some other tools and stuff like that. This one is a lot more action-based. You get flung right into the action a lot quicker than you do in the first game, and I think that's interesting. So one disappointing aspect of this one is that they did gut the multiplayer, so the multiplayer gameplay isn't present within this title, and that in itself is a little bit of a shame, because I really did enjoy the multiplayer aspect of this experience. And to see it not being carried forward is disappointing, but that was somewhat expected, considering that they also did the same thing when it comes to the original release of this collection package for other platforms. So it was expected that it wasn't going to be here. You do get the Minerva and DLC content the release for the title, just like you did with the first one. So those kind of expand narrative aspects in some interesting ways. So I do think you have a neat character. Again, you get some moments where you get to choose the direction of where things are going to go, and another dark and gritty look at Rapture. I think this one maybe gets a little bit of a bad rap from people. They tend to ignore this one when they're talking about the series, but I also think it's a nice companion piece because it fills out the overall universe of Bioshock quite a bit. Some different perspectives, seeing a even further crumbling society, meeting some new things, like you have the Big Sisters there, deadlier kind of combatants that you're dealing with. And then also the story here is an interesting one, as you're generally aiding some individuals, and I like how that comes into play. And it's hard to kind of really dive into and talk about these games, because I'm not trying to spoil anything. I want these to be titles that if you are interested in them, you can get a look at what they are, what they do, what they act like, and decide if you want to jump in and give them a try without having story elements kind of messed up. And I'm just going to get slaughtered a bunch here because this, I don't know, I'm like completely out of ammo in this section. That aside, this one is the roughest in terms of polishing on the Nintendo Switch. It still runs quite well, there's not really performance issues, but some of the visual aspects are a tad rougher, a little bit more jaggedy edges. Some of the, during the fire and stuff, looks quite rough. Again, the pool's reflections, and some things just aren't quite as... It seems like they didn't put as much of an effort into the remastering efforts of this one in comparison to, what we saw with the first game. And honestly, it's not a huge hindrance, but you can kind of see where the love and care was kind of spent on upgrades. In general, both the two Rapture-based games have lovely, creepy architecture and designs to them. This one, you get to dive a lot more into, the oceanic kind of areas, and I think that's a little bit fun. And it's just kind of cool being this different, almost tougher character, even though you're not generally seeing that in my gameplay here. I'm just not doing well in this portion, but that's absolutely fine. And that kind of wraps up our talk about the second game. Again, standalone or part of the package. And now we move on to, I think, my personal favorite of the series. This is Bioshock Infinite. This is one of the greatest games of all time. It follows Booker as he's trying to find this girl and to wipe the slate. That girl is, of course, Elizabeth here, as you're seeing. She is absolutely a lovely and enchanting NPC to have included within the game, and she's a useful one at that too. She's one that will find you ammo or supplies during battle and combat, and it's just a delight to kind of see her and interact with her character as she discovers this whole world, the darkness of this world. So this game is also interesting because you're set out up into the clouds. There's some really interesting themes and heavenly aspects to it that they play into very well. This is a very epic game too, as you meet a lot of really interesting dynamic characters that all have their own issues, their own problems, and you're kind of just introducing this huge issue as you discover who you are, and as well as the people who they are around you. And the story continues to develop and get crazy to the point that you'll likely, after completing it, spend countless hours looking online, kind of reading things about the experience you just had. And I think that makes this one even more special, is the fact that it has some terms of longevity and sticking with you. It's also just a generally beautiful game. All of the DLC content is here, so that expands this one quite a bit because they were doing a lot with extra kind of modes. And it just looks and plays fantastic on this platform. I was seriously blown away by the efforts on this one. It looks so good, and the architecture looks fantastic. The visuals, the sense of scale, the clouds soft and puffy moving through. The reflections, again, an issue in this one, jaggedy. But for the most part, I think this one really is just excellent. It's so clean and smooth and well done. There's so many dynamics to the gameplay as you're running around, again, leading into that action, really into that action aspect of gameplay in comparison to the other Bioshocks. It's definitely got a brighter, more, not necessarily happy, but, you know, cheerful kind of presentation to it. But yet it might even dig into some darker themes and concepts. They're all very mature titles, and this one really leads into it in regards to like certain revolutionary aspects, society at play, the decisions, and the long-term effects of those decisions. Even like the DLC story content in this one is really deep and helps basically wrap up and round up the whole Bioshock story. With some interesting character change-ups that you will be surprised about. I'm not going to talk about them because I don't want to spoil them, but they are insanely dark and well done. And those ones are more of a noir kind of atmosphere in comparison to what the main game is like. So Bioshock Infinite is an absolute treasure. If you're playing anything of this series, I personally heavily suggest playing this one. Playing it again, you know, after all this time, because I played it back in the day, and then the remaster, and then seeing it here again on the, well, you know, because they did the collection on other platforms, and then they did it on Switch. That's kind of the journey I'm trying to present here. And it continues to just be something that is magnificent. It's a perfect game. It's got such dynamic, unique characters, things to do. And they do change up the experience a bit. You go from your plasmids to your vigors, which, you know, you drink instead of basically injecting, and I think that was kind of cool. And those again give you different abilities that you're able to harness and use within the game and within the experience. So that about sums that one up. Again, get this separately or as part of the package. So this is overall Bioshock The Collection. 3 great games, 3 great stories, you know, kind of distinct character leads in each of them. Lots of places to visit, whether you're taking a dive deep into the oceans below or if you're peering up into the clouds of Columbia and just having a great time through these games. They are somewhat mature in nature, so keep that in mind, and keep in mind the various themes that they kind of dive into, the topics, the morality, the, you know, historic aspects that they kind of play around with. Just beautiful visuals, great looks. They've done a fantastic job remastering this package and bringing it all together on the Switch. This is a fantastic port, and I am absolutely blown away by what they were able to achieve with this. I did not expect this to happen or to play as good as it does, so I am just kind of blown away, and I'll leave just a little bit extra so that you can keep on seeing more of Infinite action, just because I do absolutely adore this game to the highest degree. To me, it's just such a treasure, you know. It's so good. Just you could play it over and over again. If I had, you know, the time to do that, I'd play it, you know, at least once a year. If I had that amount of time. And I think you're truly missing out if you don't give this one a whirl and you don't try to jump into it. But the other 2 games are also great. The first one is truly iconic. I know so many people love it, and it's well deserving. And I think the second one also maybe deserves a look too, because it often gets neglected, which is disappointing.
Are you real?
I'm real enough.
He's coming. You've gotta go.
Why?
You don't want to be here when he gets here. Just a minute, I'm getting dressed.
Get you out of here.
There's no way out. Trust me, I've looked. Stop it, you're too impatient. That's enough.
What about this?
What about it?
This is the way out, isn't it?
What are you... Give it to me. It's a way out. Locked up in here.
We'll see about that.
Who are you? Why did you come here?